Bees of the Longleaf Pine Ecosystem is tonight's program, given by Shiala Naranjo. And Shiala is a lab manager and field researcher at the Pollinator, Ecology, and Conservation Lab, led by Dr. Rachel Mallinger at the University of Florida. Her past experiences include evaluating how wildflowers support pollinator communities at Michigan State, UCF, and the University of Minnesota. And tonight, Shiala is going to discuss the biology, diversity, and conservation of bees in longleaf pine savannas. This ecosystem once covered much of the southeastern US coastal plain, but now currently occupies less than 3% of its historic range. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Shiala, and you all won't see me until the end. So thank you so much, Shiala. Thank you for speaking to us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. Cool. So I guess I'll start since you already introduced myself. So this is our outline for the talk today, and so I will talk a little bit about the stuff we do at the Pollinator Ecology Lab. Then I will talk about the longleaf pine savanna and how to recognize it, where to see it, and also if you do decide to go to these landscapes and want to find some bees, I will tell you a little bit about the bees, the bee biology, the bee diversity, what kind of bees you can find in the savanna, some of the most common bees that I think you'll be able to find, and then we'll talk about some of the limitations of the conservations of these bees. Cool. And how to save the bees. We'll finish with that and some contact information in case you want to contact me and ask me questions about bees. Okay. So I work for Dr. Rachel Mallinger, and we do a lot of pollination ecology, especially in blueberries, and I will get into that later. And so that's me at Blueberry Farm. I would say 80% of my job is pretty much agriculture, but I do get to do a little bit of conservation. And so in the middle, we have a picture of me trying to look at sparrows, actually after work, at Austin Carey, where we are trying to remove fennel in this old sand hill to see if we can get better establishment of wildflowers. Dog fennel is a pretty aggressive native, or it is native, and it is kind of tends to take over restoration sometimes. And so we're trying to remove it to see if we can get the wildflowers in. If we can get some wildflowers to seed, then we can get some bees in the area. On the right side, I have a picture of me from a couple of weeks ago at San Sebastian River Preserve, where we are doing Brazilian pepper research on how it's actually moving into flatwoods. So that's another cool experiment that we're doing. And we're also working with the National Forest Service to learn about bee diversity in old plantations as they move through restoration. Cool. So I'll be talking today about the grasslands of United States, but mostly just of the coastal pine savannas. But I do want to point out there are other grasslands. There's the Great Plains, the tall prairies, and the interior grasslands. Unfortunately, most of them are in decline or are not as they used to be. The Great Plains and the tall prairies only cover around 4%, and the southeastern interior grasslands and the pine savannas only cover around 10%. There are other savannas types in the coastal plain, but today we're focusing on the lofty pine savannas, which only cover 3%. So this is the historical range, and of that, only 3% is still around. Let me see if I can make this smaller. Okay. The three things that categorize long leaf pine savannas are open canopy, longleaf pines, and grasslands. Here's a picture of Wekiwa. If you haven't been out there, I highly suggest it. They have a beautiful area all the way in the back. So if you don't go to the springs, just keep driving. You'll get to this area where they have done a really good job at restoring it to a savanna. And Wekiwa is in Central Florida, like I mentioned, from Orlando. So this is like 20 minutes from my house. This is a map of the plant communities in Florida, and we can see the pine savannas are in pink. The yellow are going to be the sandhills, and then we have freshwater marshes, hardwoods, forests in green, and purple we have hammocks and swamps, and white we have lakes. So it's a way to see. And in Alachua County, it's going to be mostly locally pine savannas. Like I mentioned, there are other kinds of savannas in Florida, but we're only going to talk about this tonight. And they're in pink in this area, or at least their historical range. And I put Payne's Prairie for you guys to kind of orientate yourself in the map. And so we have Payne's Prairie, then we have a W for water is going to be Newman's Lake. And the places I would recommend to go see bees of the longleaf pine savannas are going to be Austin Carey and Lovely Flatwoods Reserve. So now we know where we can see this this landscape. And so if you do decide to go out there and find some bees, here's a little bit more of bee biology, and then we'll go into bee diversity, and then what bees you can actually see. If I was going to go see bees outside in this landscape, I would go in March, April, or May, or August, September, and October. And the reasons for that is because that's where you tend to see more abundance, like mass blooming of flowers, especially in spring. And so you want to go when there's flowers around. Don't go when there's no flowers. You probably won't see anything. In August and September and October, you have a lot more diversity of flowers and more, and also like a mass bloom, but it's mostly most diversity. And then from June to July, that's when that is supposed to be like the fire season. So I recommend not going during June and July because you may not see a lot of bees. You may see a lot of megachilies or leafcutter bees because they actually specialize in grass. And I will talk a little bit more about them later. And so if you wanted to see just this type of special bee, the leafcutter bees, great time to go see them. They actually peak between June and July. Most bees are ground nesting bees. 3/4 of all bees are ground nesting bees. These are some of the nests that if you were to dig them out, they will look like that. They're very different, all of them. And then I want us to kind of, if you could in the chat, if you could write in the chat, how many different types, different species of bees you think are in the world. And if you know it, you can still do it. But if you can guess and put it on the chat, I want to see how many people can guess it. Can I see chat? Okay, so I have some guesses. Hundreds. Yes, there are hundreds, actually thousands. Oh, there's my answers. So there's 20,000 different types of bees in the world, and there's 300 different types of bees in Florida. Of those, we have around, longleaf pine savannas tend to have between 120 to 200 bees, different kinds of bees. And the reason for that there's the discrepancy because we haven't, it's very hard to do like very big studies and say that precise number because there's so much fermentation in this landscape. Lots of bees to see. No, it's not working. Okay, cool. Okay, so now we can get into bees found in savannas. Okay, so I believe everybody saw this picture on the newsletter on the left side. So that is a picture of me holding an American bumblebee when I was working in Minnesota doing roadside assessments, looking for habitats for the rusty patch bumblebee, which is an endangered bumblebee. And we couldn't kill this bees, any bumblebee, because we wanted to make sure we didn't kill, a rusty patch bumblebee. So instead, what we had to do is that we had to capture each bee in this little box, in this little glass or plastic container, and squish it, and then we would have to take a picture. This bee was really big, and the first time I saw it, I actually thought it was a hummingbird because of how big it was and how fast it was flying. I learned that the reason that they get really, really big in Minnesota is because they actually have to make it through a very long winter. So they go to sleep, they hibernate when it starts snowing, before it snows, and then they wake up in spring. And so I was a little nervous about putting in the little plastic box, but you know, I didn't get stung, it was fine. But yeah, I definitely was like, do I record this? Is this an insect? Is this a bee or is this a bird? But it was me. And so on the right side, we have a picture of an American bumblebee, and its normal color pattern is going to be 2 stripes, yellow stripes in the abdomen and 1 crescent stripe on the thorax. You can see this bee in spring, on blueberries. On summer, you can see it in partridge bee. And in fall, you can see it in blazing star. It's a very common bee throughout the year. And you can see it also in grass, in grasses sometimes. Sometimes they'll forage on grasses because there are times, like I mentioned, during summer where there's not a lot of stuff going on. And also during late fall, they are looking for food. So they'll forage in grasses because it's the most abundant plant in grasslands. So in late fall, you can see it on a split blue stem, and on the right, I saw 1 American bumblebee foraging at Sweetwater Park. So I thought that was fun, and I was like, oh, I know where I'm going to use this picture for. Okay. And before I move forward, I want to, if you haven't heard of GBIF, I want to introduce you to GBIF. It's a diversity database where museums and collections can add their specimens records to make them available for everybody. A part of museum collections, this website hosts stuff from iNaturalist that is research grade. So if you're outside and you take pictures of anything and it becomes research grade, it will actually appear here, and we can use that data to inform our maps of how the specimens ranges are shifting. Species ranges are shifting. And so for my maps, they will be all in, I will have the ranges. Anything that's a range will be a line, and anything that's a record will be a circle or a hexagon here. And I don't worry about the colors, but the colors is pretty much yellow means that there's 1 specimen, and as you go to red means that there were more specimens collected. But in this map that we have here of the American bumblebee, the red range is before World War II, and the records are after World War II. And so we're seeing a huge loss of range from the northern side and the Great Plains and in Washington and Oregon. So this means that this bee unfortunately is in decline, and because of this, this bee is now considered vulnerable. It is very common in Florida, but if you go to Michigan, you don't see it. Like I was in Michigan and Minnesota, and it was not very common as it should have been. Other bees that are currently in the red list are the rusty patch bumblebee, which is considered endangered, and also the franking bumblebee, which is considered critically endangered. Cool. There are 7 other types of bumblebees in Florida, and these are some of the flowers. You can see them: blueberries, fox gloves, summer walls, black senna, and Montal Euro. Okay. Another bee that's very common in lonely pine savannas is the dark-footed sunflower bee. This bee, like the name suggested, prefers to forage on goldenrods and coastal plains, anything that has to do with Asteraceae. But right now, the foxgloves are flowering, so if you happen to go outside, you may be able to see this bee. If, like I mentioned, it's active right now, but you can also see it in July and also to November if the flowers are still around. And it has really long antennae, so that's another really key characteristic to see it. And of course, the little black foots or black feet, or yeah, legs. This is the range of this bee, or where this bee has been recorded, and the ranges that I have are for the grasslands. And as we can see, this bee is in all the different types of grasslands. which is great when we're thinking about development or when we're thinking about conservation. Because if we were to develop, let's say we develop everything becomes housing in the pine savannas, maybe we won't lose this bee forever. So maybe in the future we can do some kind of reintroduction if we were to lose this bee. So it's kind of nice to know that this bee's in different places, because it's like, okay, at least we won't lose all of them. The other bee I want to talk about is the yellow-winged mining bee, and it's active from July to September, and you can see it most of the time in Alachua County from November to September, because it has a huge affinity, or it really enjoys silkgrass, which is this flower that's in the middle. And it's kind of smaller side, but not too small. And then here, what we have as a range, we have the host plant, the silkgrass, and then we have the records, like I mentioned, like the circles or the records. And what I find interesting about this bee, and it's also like an easy to spot, is that when we look at the Western population, they found the plant back in 1970s, and then 10 years later they found the bee. But if you look at the northern range in the southeastern population of this plant, we still don't see the bee. And so this brings to question what's going on there. And so my idea, or what I think it maybe happened, which is something that happens with a lot of bees, is that they require some things for them to be able to stay in this ecosystem. And so for this bee, if we look at the left picture, we have a gopher tortoise, and then we have some ash, which because of fire just came through. And so this bee may require disturbances from gopher tortoises, or for some kind of animal that disturbs the soil, and then also fire. And so if fire and large herbivores, large gopher tortoise, not like huge, but it's still big, are able to keep disturbing the soils, these bees will be able to stick around. Gopher tortoises, they're super cool keystone species. They don't just help, mammals and plant and other insects and birds and reptiles. I don't know if they actually help birds. I'm sure they do. They also help little insects like bees and grasshoppers. And in the middle, we have a picture of the nest. And on this day, we saw around 20 to 30 different kinds of, or 20 to 30 different andrinas flying around nesting in this area. So they can support, these little burrows can support quite a bit of homes for them. This is the southeastern blueberry bee. It's another bee that you can stumble upon on February to late April if you're on this habit, if you're in a longleaf pine savanna. And this bee has a very interesting long bullet shape that makes it very easy for you to find. So it has a very distinguished bullet shape. It's a little bit smaller than a bumblebee, and it's a little bit bigger than a honeybee. But the most interesting part about this bee, or the most, I guess, distinguishable thing about this bee, is that you can actually hear it before you see it. So it makes this sound that goes like, yip, 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 yip. And so if you start hearing that, you're probably somewhere around their nesting habitat or their nesting grounds, or you're actually in the blueberry area. So they prefer mass blueberry blooms. And you can hear that sound that they make when they are either feeding, or they're actually just really annoying you and they don't want you there. And they will start flying really, really close to you. And sometimes even like bombarding you, but they won't sting you. So it's a cool bee to see and hang out with and just enjoy. I had one of the PhD students is actually working with this bee. And one day she asked me to go collect this bee, and so we have to kill them, unfortunately. And I was not able to do it because as soon as I caught one on my net, like I had my net here, and all the other bees came and they were hanging around the net, and I just got freaked out, and I was like, this is too sad. This is like the Titanic, like I can't do it. So I had to let the bee go. Anyway, so they're gregarious. They like to nest in the same area. They are very friendly with each other. It's a cool bee to see. They will not sting you. But anyway. And there are 5 different types of native bees or native blueberries in Florida. So there's a lot of stuff for them to feed on. a part of the huge commercial blueberry farms that we have. The range of this bee, unfortunately, has been lost a lot, probably to climate change, urbanization, and probably also just like a decrease of plants. So blueberries are actually depend a lot on fire, and so when you start taking fire out of these landscapes, or you start taking anything that can keep those that canopy open, this habitat, these bees can unfortunately will have to go somewhere else because they can't live where there's no food. So we have a lot of research going on this. So stay tuned. I'm sure maybe one of our other grad students can come talk about it. She's doing a lot of cool work on the plant and the bee and how they're interacting with each other as they both are becoming displaced. Like I mentioned, most of our work in the lab is funded by blueberry research, because blueberries are very hard to pollinate by themselves. They can't really do that. If you look at the shape of the shape of the flower on the left side, you can see it's a bell shape, and so it's not like it can like the pollen can travel up. If the flower goes this way, then it's a little bit easier to self-pollinate. But since the pollen cannot travel up, it makes it very hard for it to self-pollinate, which requires it to have something else to pollinate it, like a bee or some kind of wasp or something different. And so, which is great for our lab, because then we are able to do projects. And so we have a picture on the right side. We have 2 branches. And so one branch, which is the one in the middle, a bag was put on top of that branch to exclude all the pollinators from pollinating those flowers. And on the right side, we have a picture of a branch that was open to all pollinators. So no pollinator was able to interact with those flowers. And you can see the difference between the ripeness of the flower and also how ripe it is at the time it is ripe. So the size and the ripeness time. So if a flower is very well pollinated, it will become, it will be heavier, it will be bigger, but it will also increase the ripeness of it, which is great for the blueberry farmer. And so this bee is awesome. It can pollinate a lot faster and a lot better than honeybees, because honeybees are not native, so they don't have that that affinity, that love for the blueberries. Most honeybees don't. If you have a test this with honeybees, they actually tend to hate blueberries. They taste not that great, but the southeastern blueberry bee loves blueberries, so it does a great job. And so one southeastern blueberry bee can do the job of 6 honeybees. In addition to that, if a farmer has this bee, it can cut the cost of him bringing in honeybees. So honeybee hives cost between $50 to $80, and we suggest that a farmer brings up to 2 hives per acre. And so as you add up acres, you add up costs, and for some of the newer farmers, it's very hard to compete. And so for the smaller farmers, a lot of the smaller farmers, because they're using maybe less pesticides, they actually tend to have this bee, and they are able to bring less bees. They're able to not spend too much money on honeybees, and they're able to take care of these bees a little better. And so things that we do as scientists is to inform the farmer if they do have them. So a lot of farmers, it's hard to distinguish bees if you're don't have the eye for it. So we go out to farms, and we let the farmer know if he does have this bee, and where it could be leaving. So it enjoys places that are open grounds, like the one in the picture and the middle picture. And we think that it's somewhere in the savannahs nesting. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Another bee that I think is very underappreciated, and this whole genus called Laceoglossum. It's one of the most diverse and abundant genus of bees in the world, but it's also one of the most diverse and abundant in lonely pine savanna. And they tend to be very specialized, and so because they're so specialized, you can see in the range map, it's only found in pine savannas. So they tend to, that's why one of the reasons they probably are. And this one's called the Alachua bee. They're found on San John's wort, Falls Club, and yellow eye grass. I highly recommend people just go outside and look for the tiny bees. They're the size of rice, which is kind of hard to see. I get it. But they are the more diverse and the more abundant. And I really wish we had more observations of them in iNaturalist. I'm always surprised and disappointed to see so few in iNaturalist. So go out there, look for the bees. Once you start seeing the tiny bees, you will notice them everywhere. I do believe it's a little bit like plant blindness. You're always looking for that big bee, but once you start finding that tiny bee, you're like, oh man, they're like everywhere. And the last bee I'm going to talk about is the white-footed leafcutter bee. And this bee can be seen from April to November, and in Alachua County from April to October, in Blackroot, on Blazing Star. And also, I guess, honeycomb head. That's the one in the picture. That's the flower. And it has that little shape to it where it's like pretty round. Some of the other McKinleys are more like a barrel shape or like a kind of cup shape where it's like very like round. But this one has a very kind of like triangle shape at the bottom. In addition to that, most leafcutter bees have their pollen basket, instead of being on the sides, their pollen basket is actually on their little butts. So they're very distinguishable to see because they have their little bright yellow butts full of pollen. Yeah, and then this is the range for the observations that we have in GBIF for this bee. And you guys can see it tends to like maybe soil that's a little bit more sandier than you would think that you would find in savannas. Boom. I hope I'm not going. I think I'm going. Okay. Okay. So some limitations that we have. So now I want to talk a little bit about the limitations that we do have in conservation, unfortunately. Not to discourage anyone, but you know. And so one of the biggest limitations of bee activity versus bee nesting. And so one of the biggest issues that we have when we come to conservation of bees is that we have a really big unknown. And so we know that fire, herbiciding invasive or removing invasives, thinning canopies of trees or removing trees equals more flowers. And so which equals more food for bees to eat on. However, when it comes to ground cover, it's a little bit different. So we don't know, we know that it opens the ground up, but we don't actually know if the bees are actually using that ground to nest on, or those open grounds. And so that's a huge gap because 3/4 of all bees live underground and we have no idea what's going on there. And so when we're thinking of restoration, we really need to question how we do restoration and where we're doing restoration and how we can not just restore one area, but restore mass areas. And so for the white-footed leafcutter bee, you tend to see it foraging a lot in pine savannas, but we don't see it we can't find it anywhere nesting. But if you go to a sandhill, then you can see the bee nesting there. And so if this bee is unfortunately not in the same place where it eats and sleeps, then it can have a mismatch. And so we need to think about restoration together. So we need to think about pine savannas and sandhills and other types of ecotypes that can support more species. A huge issue that we also have, and more about nesting. So on the left side, we have a stock picture of some tire tracks on the sand. And on the right side, we have a picture of the southeastern blueberry bee. Guess what? She loves nesting there. That's her favorite spot to nest. So we will be driving into the field to go sampling, and we'll find them on the road. We don't find them anywhere else. And so this brings questions about maybe fire and removing invasives and thinning canopy are not enough. Maybe we need to think about something else, like bringing back the big mammals. Another reason that bee nesting is so hard to study is because it's a lot of reasons, and I'll go into them. So on the left side, we have what we call emergence strap, and pretty much the gist of it is that you put this outside, The bee will wake up in the morning, she will fly up, and there's a little bottle all the way in the bottom, in the back that you can see, and the bee will go into that bottle that's full with soapy water, and she will drown in it, and that's how we capture them. So unfortunately, we don't catch a lot of bees in it. The catch rate is between, I don't even know what to talk about. It's bad. It's very hard to catch bees. It's very expensive. They cost, each one costs $300, and we have to work at night, which is a big bummer and really hard to find people that want to do that. And so our day normally starts around 4. We will start doing our plant surveys, and then by, we have, well, not by 4, like 6. And then by 8 o'clock, we'll wait until the bees have gone to sleep, and then we'll set out the traps on, hopefully, place that they're nesting. And then when they wake up in the morning, they'll come and they'll get caught. However, bees sometimes have multiple exits. So there may be entrances, there may be multiple entrances and exits to their nest. And so they can maybe go out a different way than where we have our nest or we have our emergency trap. So it's kind of frustrating. Another thing is that if they are, it can be dangerous to work at night. And so there's that also, because we're hauling up a lot of equipment through forests, and there's, holes in the ground because of when pines get burned, they disintegrate into the ground, and there's a big hole. There's wood in the ground. So it can be very dangerous work to do, but it's definitely needed. Cool. And so things that now that you can do to save the bees, it's vote. Please vote. Vote for people that care about the environment. That's like the best thing you can do. Register to vote Florida.gov is the website if you haven't registered to vote. I'm always surprised of how young and all my friends that are really young or my friends that are really old, none of them have voted, and I'm just like, oh boy. So please vote. I'm not shaming you, but I will shame you. I will shame all my friends. And I really like this quote by Mayor Stoneman Douglas. I suggest that, if you've never heard of her, check her out. She's amazing. And I love this quote. It's my favorite quote. It says, "Be a nuisance where it counts. Do your part to inform and stimulate the public to join your actions. Be depressed, discouraged, disappointed at failures and the disheartening effects of ignorance, greed, corruption, and bad politics, but never give up." And so I think about her quite a bit, especially because she's a fan of grasslands. And I'm just like, yes, more grasslands. Other things you can do a part of voting. You can, of course, put your observations on iNaturalist, so they can take good pictures, so they can become research grade and we can use them. Not that the other ones are good, but don't have honeybees. Your 3 blueberry plants that you have at your house do not need a huge honeybee hive. Just put some wildflowers around them, and the bees will come. There's a lot of native bees that actually live in light, enjoy, or live in natural habitats, or urban habitats. And I love this quote by one of my friends who's a birder and a bee scientist. And he says that saving chickens so a lot of people say save the bees. And so he says that this is like saving chickens to save migratory birds. So we really need to think about which bees we are saving, because honeybees, they spread diseases to native bee communities, and they also can easily outcompete native bees, because native bees tend to be solitary. There are not as many of them. So a lot of reasons not to have honeybees. Another thing you can do is plant native wildflowers, plant native grasses, wildflowers, and trees. This is my friend's house, and he is, he's doing a great job. And then talk about prescribed fires. I'm from UCF. I guess I didn't mention that, but I graduated from UCF, and we burn really close to houses, like very, very close. And so the picture on the top is an area that we burned recently. And you can see on the top part, that's a row of houses, and then that's us burning. That's after the burn. And so here's another map of how close we were burning. So the middle is where the campus is at, and then that's where we burn. And so I love taking my friends out there who have never been to the UCF Arboretum, because you can see the fires, the scars, and you can see the ashes, and then you can see a house right there, and you're like, yes, you can burn. You just have to have a good team and a lot of water. Okay. And then another thing you can do when we're talking about changing the language that we use is don't call longleaf pine forest a forest, because it's not, it's a savanna. And so a lot of people think that forests don't require fire. And they're scared of California. They think that, you know, we're gonna be bad. But no, these landscapes actually will flourish and will be better if we burn them. And so, you know, savannas, like I said, require open canopies, longleaf pines, and grasses, and this cannot happen if you don't have fire. And so changing that language of what's a forest and what's a savanna is very important. Other things you can do is come help us plant grasses at the Natural Area Teaching Lab. This is Geisha's email. He is our amazing coordinator for the place. If you also want to come and just bird, we would appreciate it. We have a lot of different kind of where different habitats meet, which I think is kind of dope. And 2 months ago, we had a bunch of undergrads came and helped us plant 6,000 different kind of native grasses. So hopefully the native grasses will take off and we are able to have better burns so that we can have better restoration. Another thing you can do, if you happen to see this big hairy bee, you can take a picture of it and email it to Dr. Kimmel. His name is Chess. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Little water. You can email the picture to Chase, and he's currently looking for this bee. It's very rare. It prefers, it's called the giant scrub plaster bee. I have yet to see it. I have gone out hiking quite a bit looking for it, and I have yet to see it. But it likes forked blue curves, foxgloves, partridge bee, and black senna. And it's kind of one of those weird bees that has a weird bedtime. And so it likes to be up 2 hours after sunrise and 2 hours before sunrise, or before sundown. And that's the contact information for me, and I am done. Ta-da. If you guys have any questions, you guys can ask me questions now. I became interested in bees. My mom was a beekeeper. Actually, I grew up in a beekeeper family. We were commercial beekeepers, but I didn't become comfortable or familiar with native bees until a lot later. Probably once I started doing research. I actually used to work for Jamie Ellis, which is a honeybee guy here. And at that time, he was doing a native bee project, and somehow I just kind of ended up working a native bee project. He needed someone to identify his bees. And so I was like, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out. And that was pretty much how I got into native bees. But I always thought it was going to be plants. And so I think that's how I got into pollination ecology, because we talk mostly about plants. We actually have a huge issue recruiting undergrads, because they get into our lab and they think we're going to talk about insects, and then 80% of the time it's just talking about plants. And so they're like, this is not what I signed up for. And I'm like, okay, next question. I think they can be helpful if, and so the question is, are the bee hotels good or bad? And so they can be good if you do the maintenance, but if you don't do the maintenance, then they're terrible, because you know, bees that like to parasitize other bees will find them and put their babies on it, and they'll get, so that's not good. So and so you have to take care of the tubes. I believe you have to like remove them during winter, and then put them either in a refrigerator, not a freezer, or a refrigerator, for them to kind of like imitate winter, and then you take them out again in spring. But it's good to do that, just keep doing maintenance, because if not, they will become not great. And also, I think there are places where they found a lot of it can become very disease ridden. So like bacteria and viruses can get into them, from my understanding. The question is if bees are attracted to colors white, yellow, and if we should avoid those. I mean, I think you can wear them. I wear white as a beekeeper, but they do like the color white, and they do like the color yellow, and also the color blue. And so when we're actually making traps for catching bees, we actually use those three colors to attract the bees into our fake flowers. So we make fake flowers and we make them those colors. And each color will bring different types of bees. So some bees like blues better, and some bees like whites better. And so, you know, you want to put all of them out so you can get a range of bees. You're not just getting the bees that like yellow color. And so I think you can wear that. It's fine. There are some bees that really like sweat, and so they'll come up to your skin, and maybe you'll feel a tickle or something. So that's the reason that some bees are called sweat bees, because they'll come and lick your sweat. Okay.
What do the sweat bees do with the sweat?
I think it's just like any other animals that just require sweat or salts. Yeah. But they're pretty cute. And they can't really sting you. They don't really have big glands to sting you. Only bees that are social have really developed those big venom glands to protect their hive. Most bees are solitary, so they don't, for them having to evolve, they haven't evolved that, because they're like, well, if my nest goes to the waste, you know, it gets eaten by something, I'll just make another one, or I already have like 50 other more nests somewhere else.
Are there any bees that specialize in, you know, like going to like flowers? When I think of like savannas, you know, some of them have, you know, like the carnivorous plants, the pitcher plants and things. Do you know any that specialize in like pitcher plants?
I don't know much about that, but I got a feeling that's mostly moths and flies. And I think it has to do a lot with the scent. I think that they smell different, and so they flies and butterflies tend to be more in tune with like smells than honeybees, or the bees. Bees tend to be more like eye orientated. Yeah. Not to say that smells don't matter, but from my very low stuff that I know about carnivorous plants, I think that's somewhere.
Thank you.
Cool.
Oh, are there any flowers that native bee, you know, like, are there native flowers that native bees will more readily go to that the like the honeybees, the European honeybees won't?
I think the honeybees tends to be pretty generalist, but I guess also like very tiny flowers. They don't really go for it because they're too tiny for them to do it. So honeybees tend to like going to areas that has massive blooms. So they you know, they'll come down on a massive bloom and just eat everything. But native bees are not that specific, and they'll forage on, like, they'll find that one little flower that is like in the whole hectare, like that's blooming. And so that is the difference between how they forage, but it is concerning when, you know, the honeybees are chomping on all the massive blooms.
Thank you.
Welcome. Cool.
Are there any other questions? Awesome. Well, anything else, Shiala?
No, just please go outside and look at bees. They're great, and we really need to more people to go. I don't know what you would call it. I always ask my friends what we should call it, because birders have, I'm going birding, but we don't have anything to call it when you're gonna go look for bees. So yeah, go look for bees. They're great. They'll appreciate it. We'll appreciate it.
Yeah, I still need to upload. I saw like a green bee on one of my squash plants that I have, and I keep on forgetting to upload it onto iNaturalist, but I can't wait to find out what kind it is.
Yeah, that's actually how we find a lot of the non-natives that are coming in, because we do have quite a bit of non-natives that have established pretty much in Florida. So one of them was an orchid bee, and we wouldn't know if someone hadn't uploaded to iNaturalist, and that just happened like I think a couple of years ago. So yeah, they're like big, massive green bee that has huge legs that they use to collect smells from flowers, and it's weird. Just wow. Yeah, they're very cool. They're called orchid bees. Google it. It's a cool bee, cool looking bee. You can find it in Orlando a lot. So yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much, Shiala. This presentation was recorded. I will get it uploaded as soon as possible, and you'll be able to find it on our website. And as soon as I'll post a link to that whenever after I get it uploaded. It'll be on our Facebook page and on our website. So thank y'all so much for joining us. Thank you, Shiala. This was extremely informative, and it was very exciting to have a presentation not about birds. Yeah,
cool.
Sweet. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you guys for having me. Bye.